Chief Engineer Sarah Chen wiped the sweat from her brow as she studied the holographic readout of the HSS Resilience power grid. Something wasn't right. The quantum core's output had been fluctuating all morning, tiny variations that most engineers would dismiss. But Chen hadn't survived 15 years in deep space by ignoring her instincts. Martinez, run another diagnostic on secondary coupling array. She called out to her assistant. And this time, check the quantum harmonic readings. The young engineer nodded, his fingers dancing across the control panel. Before he could report his findings, the ship's emergency klaxons burst to life. All hands, battle stations, multiple Kryvax warships detected dropping out of hyperspace. Captain Diana Walsh's voice cut through the chaos. This is not a drill. Chen's heart raced, but her voice remained steady. Engineering crew, emergency protocols. Jackson, seal off the auxiliary power conduits. Rodriguez, bring the backup generators online. Martins, the first impact rocked the ship before she could finish. The lights flickered as energy weapons from the Kryvax fleet slammed into the Resilience shields. Chen grabbed a support beam to stay upright, her mind already calculating potential damage scenarios. Direct hit on decks 4 through 7. Someone shouted over the comm. Hull breach in Section 12. That's impossible, Martins said, his face pale. Our shields should have. They're using resonance torpedoes. Chen cut him off, her eyes scanning damage reports flooding her console. New Kryvax tech, designed to penetrate shields by matching their frequency. She activated her neural link to the ship's engineering network. Bridge, this is engineering. We need to modify our shield harmonics every 30 seconds, or we're dead in space. Negative, Chief, Walsh replied, her voice tight with tension. Our shield generators can't handle that kind of rapid modulation. They'll burn out. Chen was already moving toward the main engineering bay, grabbing her toolkit. They'll burn out anyway if we take another hit like that. Give me 5 minutes. We don't have 5 minutes. Another impact rocked the ship. Warning lights blazed across every console as the power grid struggled to compensate. Chen ignored them all, focusing instead on the impossible task ahead. Martinez, Jackson, with me, she ordered, heading for the shield generator access tunnel. The rest of you, keep this ship running. Rodriguez, you're in charge until I return. The access tunnel was barely wide enough for one person, a claustrophobic maze of power conduits and control circuits. Chen crawled through it with practiced ease, her neural link feeding her real-time data about the shield generator's status. What's the plan, Chief? Jackson asked, following close behind. We're going to rebuild the shield harmonics controller, Chen replied, reaching the generator housing. While it's running. Martinez's voice cracked. That's not possible. The energy feedback alone would kill us instantly. Chen was already removing panels, exposing the generator's core systems. Probably. But the Kryvax are definitely going to kill us if we don't try. Jackson, hand me the quantum spanner. The next 15 minutes were a blur of calculated risks and impossible decisions. Chen's hands moved with surgical precision, modifying circuits that no engineer had ever dared touch during combat. Every few seconds, another impact would shake the ship, and warning signals would scream about imminent system failure. But Chen had learned long ago that impossible was just another word for hasn't been done yet. She rerouted power flows, bypassed safety protocols, and literally rewired the laws of physics while her ship fought for survival. Bridge, this is engineering, she called out, making the final connections. Implementing shield modifications now. Captain, I need you to trust me. There was a moment of silence before Walsh responded. Do it. Chen took a deep breath and activated the modified systems. For a terrifying second, every light on the ship went dark. Then power surged back, and the shield generators hummed with new life. What did you do? Martins whispered, staring at his readings in disbelief. Turned the shield generator into a learning system, Chen explained, already heading back to main engineering. It's now capable of analyzing incoming fire and automatically adjusting harmonics to match. The Kryvax won't be able to lock onto any single frequency. That's... Jackson shook his head. The energy requirements alone should make that impossible. Should, yes. Chen allowed herself a small smile. But sometimes the laws of physics need a gentle reminder about who's in charge. On the bridge, Captain Walsh watched in amazement as the next volley of Kryvax torpedoes splashed harmlessly against their shields. Her tactical officer reported that shield efficiency had actually increased by 20%. How? The Kryvax fleet commander's voice crackled over the emergency channel, unable to hide his confusion. Your shields were failing. We saw the damage. No system can be modified that quickly, especially during combat. Walsh smiled, though the alien couldn't see it. Commander, I'd be happy to explain the capabilities of human engineers, but I suspect you wouldn't believe me. Suffice it to say, you might want to reconsider your attack strategy. In engineering, Chen was already focused on the next crisis, barely acknowledging the congratulations from her crew. The impossible repair had bought them time, but she knew the Kryvax would adapt. They always did. Martinez, she called out, pulling up new schematics on her neural link. How do you feel about rebuilding the quantum core's containment field while it's running? The young engineer's eyes widened, but he was already reaching for his toolkit. You know, Chief, one of these days you're going to suggest something that's actually impossible. Maybe, Chen agreed, heading toward the core. But today is not that day. On the bridge of the Kryvax command ship, Eternal Dominion, Fleet Commander Vexkar watched the battle unfold with growing unease. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation that his subordinates knew well enough to fear. Impossible, he muttered, all four eyes fixed on the tactical display. Show me the shield analysis again. His science officer, Ixel, brought up the data with trembling appendages. The human vessel's shield harmonics are. They're shifting faster than our targeting systems can track. The modifications they made during combat should have overloaded their generators. Instead, efficiency has increased. Vexkar's kitten plates rattled, the Kryvax equivalent of a frustrated sigh. And their quantum core, still operational, despite readings that suggest it's been completely reconfigured. Twice. Ixel paused, mandibles twitching. Commander, I don't understand how they're doing this. Our intelligence suggested human ships were technologically inferior to ours. Their advantages were supposed to be limited to creativity. Clearly, Vexkar growled, we underestimated what human creativity truly means. On the HSS Resilient, Chief Engineer Chen was elbow-deep in the quantum core's secondary control systems. Sweat dripped from her forehead as she manipulated fields of pure energy with nothing but determination and a modified plasma torch. Martinez, how's that containment field holding? She called out, not taking her eyes off her work. Stable, but the harmonics are all wrong, he replied, checking readings that shouldn't have been possible. Chief, we're breaking about 15 laws of physics right now. Good thing physics doesn't have a police force, Chen muttered. Jackson, reroute power from decks 3 through 7 through the auxiliary grid. We need to free up enough energy for what comes next. Captain Walsh's voice crackled over the comm. Engineering, we've got new problems. The Kryvax are launching some kind of quantum disruptors. Our modified shields won't hold against a direct hit. Chen processed this information while simultaneously adjusting the core's output. Copy that, Captain. Give me 2 minutes. The Kryvax aren't giving us 2 minutes, Chief. Then I'll do it in 1. Chen's fingers flew across control surfaces as she accessed the ship's main computer. Martinez, remember that theoretical paper we discussed last week about using quantum entanglement to create a feedback loop in shield systems? Martinez paled. Chief, that was theoretical for a reason. No one's ever. Time to test the theory. Chen was already implementing changes, her neural link feeding instructions directly to the ship's systems. Jackson, I need you to synchronize the auxiliary power grid with the shield harmonics. Martinez, help me set up a quantum resonance chamber using the secondary deflector array. A quantum resonance chamber? Jackson's voice cracked. With the secondary deflector? That's not even. Those systems aren't compatible. They are now, Chen replied, making final adjustments. Captain, brace for powered fluctuations. Things are about to get interesting. On the Eternal Dominion, alarms suddenly blared. Ixel's mandibles clacked in shock as he studied his readings. Commander, the human vessel. They're using their shields to generate a quantum field. Explain, Vexcar demanded. They've somehow created a quantum resonance chamber using their deflector systems. It's redirecting our disruptor energy back into their shield grid, but the harmonics are. This shouldn't be possible. The energy requirements alone. The tactical display erupted with new data as the resilient shields began emitting pulses of quantum energy. Each pulse matched the frequency of the Kryvax disruptors perfectly, but in reverse phase. By the first nest, Vexcar whispered, they're not just blocking our attacks. They're using our own weapons to power their defenses. In engineering, Chen allowed herself a small smile as power readings stabilized. The quantum resonance chamber was working better than she'd hoped, converting enemy fire into usable energy. It wouldn't last forever. The jury-rigged systems would burn out eventually. But it didn't need to. Chief, Martinez called out, his voice filled with awe. The Kryvax. They've stopped firing. Of course they have, Chen replied, already moving to the next crisis. They're trying to figure out how we did it. Speaking of which, how's that core reconfiguration coming along? You want to reconfigure the core again? We just finished the last modifications. Chen pulled up new schematics on her neural link. The Kryvax are adapting. So should we. Besides, I've got some ideas about using the quantum resonance effect to boost our weapon systems. More impossible modifications? Martinez asked, reaching for his tools. Martinez, Chen said with a grim smile. The word impossible is just humanity's way of keeping score. On the Eternal Dominion, Vexcar made a decision. All ships maintain distance, but do not engage. I want every scanner focused on that vessel. Study everything they do. We need to understand. He trailed off as new energy readings blazed across his tactical display. The human ship's weapon systems were powering up, but the energy signatures were like nothing he'd ever seen. Commander, Ixel reported, his voice trembling. They're reconfiguring their quantum core. Again. But this time they're linking it to their weapons array through the quantum resonance chamber they just created. Vexcar's mandibles clicked rapidly as he realized what that meant. The humans hadn't just defeated his latest attack. They'd used it to make themselves stronger. And now, all ships, evasive maneuvers, he ordered. Battle formation Delta. They're not just engineers anymore. They're something else entirely. The battle shifted into its third hour, and news of the HSS Resilient's unprecedented engineering feats had spread through the human fleet like wildfire. On the destroyer HS Intrepid, Chief Engineer Hannah Park watched sensor feeds of the Resilient's modifications with growing excitement. Captain, Park called over the comm, requesting permission to implement similar shield modifications. I've been studying the Resilient's energy patterns, and I think we can replicate their quantum resonance chamber. You think? Captain Miguel Torres raised an eyebrow. Chief Chen's modifications were insane, impossible, revolutionary. Park was already gathering her tools. Yes to all three. But that's what we do, isn't it? We see the impossible and think, challenge accepted. Torres smiled despite himself. Do it. Across the battlefield, more human ships began adopting Chen's innovations. Some succeeded, others failed, but each attempt taught them something new. Engineering crews shared data in real time, improving and refining the techniques. What had started as one engineer's desperate gambit was evolving into a new form of combat doctrine. Back on the Resilient, Chen monitored these developments while tackling her latest challenge. The quantum resonance chamber had exceeded expectations, but the power fluctuations were starting to strain the ship's structural integrity. Martinez, status report on the hull reinforcement protocols. Nearly complete, Chief, but these modifications, he shook his head in amazement. We're using the quantum field to strengthen the molecular bonds of the hull plating itself. The theoretical applications alone. Theory later, Chen interrupted. Right now, I need you focused on. A massive explosion rocked the ship, different from the previous impacts. Chen's neural link flooded with damage reports. Direct hit on Section 8. Jackson shouted. They've adapted their weapons to bypass the quantum resonance field. Chen was already moving. Captain, the Kravacs have found a weakness in our defenses. Request permission to try something extremely inadvisable. Define extremely inadvisable. Chief, I want to reverse the polarity of the quantum core while simultaneously reconfiguring our shield grid into a cascading array of microfields. There was a pause before Walsh responded. And if it doesn't work? Best case, total power failure. Worst case, we create a small quantum singularity. Do it. On the Eternal Dominion, Vexkar watched in horror as his tactical advantage evaporated. The human vessel's shield grid was fragmenting. No, transforming. Instead of one large field, it now consisted of thousands of tiny interconnected barriers, each operating on a different quantum frequency. Impossible, Ixel whispered. The computational power required to coordinate that many individual fields. Stop saying that word, Vexkar snapped. These humans have made it meaningless. What matters is what they're going to do next. He got his answer as the Resilience quantum core began emitting readings that defied analysis. The ship's entire energy signature seemed to invert, creating ripples in space-time itself. The effect spread quickly to other human vessels as they adopted the new modifications. The battlefield became a maze of quantum anomalies and shifting energy patterns that rendered Krivac's targeting systems useless. The humans, Ixel reported, his voice filled with reluctant admiration. They're not just repairing their ships anymore. They're rewriting the rules of space combat while we watch. In the Resilience engineering bay, Chen monitored the cascade effect with grim satisfaction. The inverted quantum core was stable, barely, and the micro-shield array was performing better than she'd hoped. Chief, Martinez called out, the other ships. They're asking for our modification specs. The whole fleet wants to implement these changes. Chen nodded, already uploading the data. Send everything. And tell them to be creative with the implementations. The more variations we have, the harder it'll be for the Kravacs to counter them all. You're encouraging other ships to experiment with potentially unstable quantum modifications, Jackson asked incredulously. Of course. Chen pulled up new schematics on her neural link. Innovation through controlled chaos. It's the human way. She paused, studying the energy readings. Speaking of chaos, who wants to help me try something interesting with the weapon systems? Martinez groaned but reached for his toolkit. Define interesting. Remember how we used the quantum resonance chamber to absorb their energy attacks? Well, I've been thinking about applying that same principle to our torpedo guidance systems. Across the battlefield, Vexkar watched as the human fleet transformed before his eyes. Each ship was now implementing its own variations of the Resilience modifications, creating an ever-changing tapestry of impossible engineering. Commander, his tactical officer reported, we can't predict their shield configurations anymore. Each ship's defenses are unique and constantly evolving. It's like they're treating fundamental physics as mere suggestions. Vexkar's mandibles clicked slowly as he came to a decision. In all his years of combat, he'd never encountered anything like this. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were revolutionizing space combat in real time, turning their greatest weakness, their supposedly inferior technology, into an unprecedented advantage. Send word to the fleet, he ordered. Prepare tow. He never finished the order. The Resilience weapons blazed to life, launching torpedoes that seemed to phase in and out of normal space, guided by principles that shouldn't have worked. But they did work because humans had decided they would. The battle's turning point had arrived, heralded not by superior firepower or overwhelming numbers, but by the relentless creativity of human engineers who refused to accept the impossible. Word of the battle spread across subspace channels faster than light itself. On space stations, colony worlds, and ships throughout the galaxy, beings of all species gathered around communication arrays, watching in stunned silence as footage of the human fleet's impossible modifications circulated. On the prestigious Galactic Engineering Academy orbital platform, Master Engineer Catheri, a respected Valaxian theorist, had to steady herself with all 6 appendages as she reviewed the sensor data. "These readings cannot be accurate," she announced to her assembled colleagues. "The human engineers are performing quantum core modifications during active combat. They're treating highly unstable energy fields like construction materials." "Look at this," her colleague Zurich added, manipulating a holographic display. "They're not just repairing damage. They're improving their systems while under fire. The HSS Resilience shield efficiency has increased by 47% since the battle began." In the Kryvax fleet, the situation had devolved into chaos. Their carefully planned attack formations were now useless against the constantly evolving human defenses. Each time they adapted their weapons, the humans would not only counter the adaptation, but turn it into an advantage. "Commander Vexkar," Ixel reported, his voice strained. 3 more human ships have successfully replicated the Resilience quantum resonance chamber, but they've all modified it differently. One vessel is using it to create localized time dilation effects around incoming projectiles. Vexkar's kitten plates rattled in disbelief. Time dilation. They're manipulating temporal mechanics now, during combat. "Sir," the humans. Ixel paused, struggling to find the words. "They don't approach engineering like any species we've encountered. They're not bound by theoretical limitations or established protocols. They see a problem, and they simply refuse to accept that it can't be solved." On the Resilient, Chen was deep in the ship's bowels, making adjustments to systems that had never been meant to interact. The quantum core's inverted polarity had opened up possibilities that she'd only dreamed about in her most ambitious moments. Martinez synchronized the torpedo guidance systems with the quantum field fluctuations, she ordered. "If my calculations are correct, we can use the temporal distortions to predict enemy movement patterns." "Chief," Martins replied, his hands flying over control surfaces, "we're basically letting an artificial quantum consciousness guide our weapons by looking into probable futures. I prefer to think of it as aggressive temporal mathematics," Chen said with a grim smile. "Jackson, how's that power distribution matrix holding up?" "It's stable." Jackson sounded unsure. "The energy readings don't make sense, but everything's working. It's like the laws of physics have given up trying to stop us." Throughout the sector, vessels of various species began altering course to witness the battle firsthand. The Arcturian Science Directorate dispatched research ships. The Valaxian Engineering Corps sent observers. Even the notoriously isolationist Zinthar emerged from their nebula territories to study what was happening. On the prestigious new MIT orbital campus, Professor Sarah Chen's lecture on theoretical quantum mechanics was interrupted by urgent messages from former students now serving in the fleet. "My sister," one message read, "is showing the galaxy why humans never learned to accept impossible as an answer." In the heart of Kryvax space, the High Command received increasingly desperate communications from their fleet. The initial reports of human engineering feats had been dismissed as exaggerations, but as more data poured in, a terrifying reality began to sink in. These humans weren't just fighting back. They were revolutionizing warfare itself through sheer creative determination. "They're treating starships like workshop projects," one admiral observed with a mixture of horror and fascination. "They're modifying fundamental systems as casually as one might repair a ground vehicle." Back on the Resilient, Chen's neural link buzzed with incoming requests from engineering crews throughout the fleet. Everyone wanted to know how she'd achieved the impossible, not so they could copy her exactly, but so they could put their own spin on the innovations. Chief, Martinez called out, "The Intrepid's engineering team has combined our quantum resonance chamber design with some kind of magnetic pulse technology. They're using it to create localized pockets of altered spacetime around incoming enemy fire." Chen nodded approvingly. "Send them our latest torpedo guidance modifications. Let's see what they do with those." The ripple effect of human engineering creativity continued to spread. Each successful modification inspired 3 more. Every impossible solution sparked dozens of new ideas. The Kryvax had expected to face a technologically inferior enemy. Instead, they found themselves against an entire species that treated physics itself as more of a suggestion than a law. "You know what the real problem is for them," Chen mused as she made yet another adjustment to the quantum core. "They think technology has limits. They see a system's design specifications as absolute boundaries. But us," she grinned, "we see specifications as challenges. Every impossible task is just an invitation to prove it possible." Across subspace channels, a new message began to spread. "Watch the humans. They're not just winning a battle. They're teaching the galaxy how to think differently about everything we thought we knew." And in the depths of space, countless beings of all species began to understand what humanity had known all along. The only true limits are the ones you choose to accept. 3 days after the battle that would become known as the Engineers' Revolution, the Kryvax High Command did something unprecedented. They requested a formal meeting with the Human Engineering Corps. The conference room aboard the neutral station Argos Prime hummed with tension. On one side sat Commander Vexkar and a delegation of Kryvax military leaders. On the other, Chief Engineer Chen and representatives from various human ships, still wearing their grease-stained uniforms. "We have reviewed the battle data extensively," Vexkar began, his mandibles moving carefully to form human words. "Our analysis suggests that your engineering crews performed no fewer than 73 modifications that our scientists had previously declared impossible." Chen shrugged. "We had a different opinion about what's impossible." Clearly, Vexkar's upper eyes blinked rapidly. "Our civilization has advanced spacefaring technology for over 10,000 years. We have established protocols, tested theories, proven limitations. Yet in a single battle, your engineers casually discarded centuries of established doctrine." "With all due respect, Commander," Chen replied, pulling up a holographic display of her quantum core modifications, "doctrine is just another word for what worked yesterday. We prefer to focus on what might work tomorrow." The meeting lasted 12 hours. The Kryvax asked questions. The humans provided answers that often made their translators struggle with concepts that defied conventional physics. But beneath the technical discussions, a deeper understanding began to emerge. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the effects of the battle continued to ripple outward. The Galactic Engineering Academy established a new department dedicated solely to studying human adaptive mechanics. The Valaxian Engineering Corps began recruiting human instructors. Even the xenophobic Zenthor requested technical advisors. "The humans have given us a gift," Ktheri announced to a packed lecture hall at the Academy. "Not just their innovations, but their way of thinking. They've shown us that the boundaries we accepted were largely self-imposed." On the Resilient, life was slowly returning to normal, or as normal as it could be when your ship had become a symbol of engineering revolution. Chen found herself bombarded with requests for interviews, lectures, and consulting positions. "Chief," Martinez called out one morning, "the Arcturian Science Directorate wants to know if you'll write a paper on quantum resonance chamber theory." Chen looked up from where she was modifying the ship's waste recycling system to generate additional power. "Tell them I'll do better. I'll show them how to build one that doubles as a coffee maker." The joke spread through the engineering corps and became something of a motto. "If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, make it work. If it still doesn't work, make it make coffee. But the most significant changes came from the Krivax themselves. Their initial humiliation at being defeated gave way to a burning curiosity. How had these humans done it? More importantly, how could they learn to think the same way? "We have established a new protocol," Vexkar announced at the conclusion of the conference. "All Krivax engineering crews will now include human advisors. In return, we offer access to our technical database, spanning 10 millennia." Chen smiled. "Commander, I think you'll find that humans are even better at learning than we are at improvising. Just try not to be alarmed when we start suggesting improvements to your 10,000-year-old designs." The last piece of official business was the formal recognition of what became known as the Chen Principle, now taught at engineering academies throughout known space. The difference between possible and impossible is often just a matter of how badly you need something to work. As the conference concluded, a young Krivax engineer approached Chen with what seemed to be nervousness. "Chief Engineer," he clicked, "I have been studying your battle modifications. I have ideas about combining your quantum resonance principles with our ancestral technology. My superiors say it cannot be done, but—" Chen's eyes lit up. "But you want to try anyway?" "Yes. Is that the human way?" "No," Chen replied, pulling out her toolkit. "The human way is to try, fail, try again, succeed in a way no one expected, and then figure out how to make it even better. Want to get started?" The young engineer's mandibles quivered with excitement. "Now. But there are no pressing needs, no emergencies." "Kid," Chen said with a grin, "the best time to do the impossible is when nobody's shooting at you. Let's see what we can break in the name of progress." And so, in a corner of a neutral station, a human and a Krivax began tinkering with reality, pushing the boundaries of what their peoples thought possible. It would not be the last time. Across the galaxy, engineering crews of all species began adopting what they called human protocols, approaching problems not as insurmountable obstacles, but as challenges waiting to be solved. The age of impossible was over. The age of let's try it and see what happens had begun. And in the depths of space, aboard countless ships and stations, engineers of all species started looking at their systems with new eyes, asking themselves the question that had driven human innovation since the dawn of their civilization. "I wonder what would happen if..."